Chance she'd coach me?
It's your hometown. It's ours too. San Diego County Credit Union.
If you've driven around San Diego County, you know there are a lot more for sale signs sticking up in front yards. They're coming up like mushrooms after a rainstorm. In a lot of cases, those are distressed homes. Those are people trying to sell before foreclosure looms, or people who've already been foreclosed on trying to get out. In some cases, those properties are owned by banks already. And as we said a couple of minutes ago, those properties have to be kept up in the neighborhood. When you have a property that was abandoned by somebody who couldn't pay for it anymore, many times they're in bad shape, and it becomes the responsibility of the bank and the brokers who are handling that to keep the place looking good, keep the lawn mowed. If you have a situation like that in your neighborhood, the realtor that has the sign in the front yard wants to hear from you. They want to know if there's a problem. They don't want to have a bomb on the block right next door to your house. We are with David Norberg from Keller Williams Realty. David does work with a lot of people who sell short, or people who are in trouble trying to sell before they reach foreclosure. And Donna Sanfilippo, the owner and operator of San Diego REO, real estate owned. She works for the banks selling real estate properties out there. What's out there right now? Are we at a point where someone who's sitting home thinking about investing or thinking about trying to find an inexpensive, bigger house, is this the point where they should move and go look for something because there's so many foreclosures out there?
You know, I would think this is a good market for a first-time buyer, even for some investors, not necessarily an investor that has short-term goals, but maybe longer-term goals, and definitely a good market for a first-time buyer to be able to move into a property. There are still very good loans out there. Some of the loans that got the people in trouble before, I think, have gone away, so I think you need to look at the loan closely, but there's good, it's low interest rates, and there's a lot of properties to choose from right now.
What do you have, for example? You sit in your office every day and more lists come through. In many cases, you'll get a note from a bank saying this one's getting close to foreclosure. You get kind of forewarned sometimes, don't you?
A few of the banks let us know that they have a pre-foreclosure, but they want us to keep an eye on it.
You can start looking at
condition of it, on the exterior, but generally it's already back to the bank, and then we're notified within usually 24 hours.
Tell me the kind of things that cross your desk on an average day. What size homes and what kind of prices we're talking about in the county here?
Right. Uniquely, there's a lot of condos, which we would expect, and I think the condo conversion probably added to that a bit. People moved up and moved in a little too quickly into a different kind of product that maybe they shouldn't have been in, a different home they shouldn't have been in. But what we see primarily is condos. We see probably that average price range, which is in that $400,000 to $500,000, which is a median price range for San Diego. And typically those are first-time buyer homes.
Was there a lot of greed that got involved here over the last few years? Were there people who were greedy, thinking that they could just buy a piece of property and make money overnight? Were there mortgage companies and banks that were greedy and loaning to almost anybody? And were there people who made those condo conversions kind of greedy and putting stuff back on the market that kind of qualified as a home but wasn't really ownership?
Sure. And it was a greed probably right across the board, from, like you said, maybe some of the homeowners, maybe some of the lenders, maybe some of the realtors, where people were getting into properties where, again, they were looking at the short little window as opposed to what they possibly, the long-range home ownership. And that's what's gotten so many people in trouble right now.
They thought they'd make money no matter what.
Right, because the market was going up so fast that 3 years from now it was going to be worth $50,000 more than we paid for it, so we could either refinance it or sell it again and make a profit.
And I used that word flip as we went to the break. A lot of people bought properties over the last couple of years intending to flip them, hang on to them for 6 months, and sell them for $50,000 more than they paid for them. Where'd that come from? Where'd that mentality come from?
I believe it probably came from the 20% a year appreciation. When you have that appreciation year after year, certainly your investor is going to eye it as an avenue to, that's his job, is to go in there, purchase the property, hold it, maybe fix it a little bit, maybe not, flip it and pick up that appreciation. It's a good way. It was a good way then. A lot of people probably did well with that. But it's still, that we're definitely not in that market.
It reminds me of a chain letter or a pyramid scheme. Right. Somebody at the end ends up paying for all those things. Somebody at the front makes the money, somebody at the end ends up paying.
Yeah, we have one of our lenders that actually has verbiage in their contract that says, oh, by the way, if you sell it within 6 months, they'll calculate out maybe 9 months for X number, maybe 20% more. well, they forbid it, and they put it as a deed restriction because they don't want their properties flipped.
Are some people simply not emotionally ready to own homes? Did we bring a lot of people into the market over the past couple of years who perhaps weren't mentally prepared to go through what you have to go through if you buy a home and pay for it?
Well, and it's probably not just... it's not that they weren't mentally prepared as much as they weren't mentally prepared for as big of a step as some people took. You know, when you could get some of these loans that were, you know, 2% interest or 1% interest, and they're just teaser loans to get you in. Because if you go from no home to $1 million home, you know, it's not going to work out probably.
What kind of emotions are involved from both of you? You've met the people who all through. I know, Donna, before you did REOs, you were a regular real estate broker, and you've come up against people who were in trouble. Tell me the kind of emotions, just so folks out there who are facing that payment next month realize they're not alone.
Well, at one time, I went and knocked on the doors of a lot of people that I knew had notice of defaults, and across the board, the general consensus was there is no problem. What problem? And so there a lot of those.
Get off my doorstep.
Yeah. There's a lot of denial in that situation, and so, you know, what I would encourage you to do is to, if you know that you're headed in that direction, you know, we got to face reality. I mean, because this could affect you and your credit and your family for a number of years. And so if there is a problem, seek help, because there's plenty of help out there now.
And Donna, you said that the banks are willing to deal, but there's got to be some point where they draw the line.
And there is, and I know through their loss mitigation they have a particular set of rules that they need to follow. They need to adhere to. They have investors. They have a totally different game plan on that side. Once it goes into REO, it's a different department. They react differently, and you'd mentioned before they're non-emotional, and they're corporate. It's working with a corporate client that has bottom line primarily.
Well, take us step by step. The person who's facing foreclosure is first of all dealing with who in the bank, and then you mentioned loss mitigation, then the people who do the actual foreclosures. Tell us how that works.
And I think probably David works with them day in, day out, more in loss mitigation than I would.
But I mean, there's a foreclosure department before it gets actually, you know, foreclosed on. Then if we're going to try and do a short sale, then there's a loss mitigation department, and then, like Donna said, then there's an REO department. So there's different departments depending upon where you are in your, quote, little trouble streak here.
And do they get harder and colder as you go up the ladder? Does it get more and more business and less sympathetic?
You know, a bank is a corporation, and so just because they're an REO or if they're in loss mitigation, they're just a business that they're running, and they run it across the board the same. They just different people have different jobs.
How do you get rid of these properties once you get them, Donna? How do you get rid of these properties?
Well, you know what? Generally, we try to maintain them as best we can. You know, so they show well. But then we hope that they're priced aggressively, which means that any bank may have another loan on that street. So they're not going to do that 30% undervalue. There's not.
I never thought about that. I mean, no, okay, you're right.
They have other loans out there, and let's say this particular bank may have one down the street. They certainly want to maintain